Alright. The claim of fact that I'm responding to today is that it is too late to change the effects of global climate change. Right away, before I say anything else, I just want to establish the fact that that is incredibly ambiguous. Change could mean either negative or positive. It doesn't have to necessarily mean that we can't reverse the effects of global climate change. So in order to actually complete my presentation, I'm just going to argue that it is not too late to reverse the effects of global climate change. So the three secondary claims that I am responding to are that the global CO2 concentration is rising to a dangerous level of 450 parts per million, that there is a failure to reach global accord on limiting the cause of rising CO2 levels, and that it is difficult to react to the consequences of the effects of increased greenhouse gases. So another thing right off the bat, none of these really say anything about any change that would occur if we were to fix these issues. So it's not really arguing that it's too late to change anything, it's just giving facts about what's going on. So the first secondary claim, that global CO2 concentration is rising to a dangerous level of 450 parts per million, I'm just going to assume that they were arguing that it's not possible to reverse that, when in fact that's not true at all. So my first challenge is an evidence challenge saying that in order to reduce this level, which is currently at 400 parts per million, which is a fact that they had given, so saying that you can't reverse that is untrue. In fact, you must, according to Robert Goodland of Meatonomics, the solution to this problem would be to cut 25 to 40% of CO2 emissions by 2020, and that would stabilize the CO2 limit in the air or in the atmosphere by 300 parts per million. Or 350 parts, this would reduce it to 350 parts per million, which is the pre-industrial level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So this automatically would stabilize the environment, reduce global climate change and all that. So this also plays into looking for healthier diets. So this is obviously something that this is a viable solution to the issue of the CO2 level in the atmosphere. The other thing that Robert Goodland said is that soy and other plant-based products do double duty by recycling the carbon dioxide and creating meat alternatives. This also plays into another solution that we have to reducing the CO2 level in the atmosphere. How Stuff Works said, or let me find the actual name of the person. Hey, sorry. Okay, sorry. Jonathan Strickland of How Stuff Works said that it could take as long as 1,000 years after a complete halt of greenhouse gas emissions for environmental measures like sea level and ocean surface temperature to return to pre-industrial levels. So this brings me to my second evidence claim, or challenge, is that it is not highly unlikely to completely restore the CO2 parts per million in the atmosphere. Just because we can't reduce it immediately, it would take some time, doesn't mean that we should completely stop all efforts immediately. 1,000 years from now, yeah, that's a couple hundred generations, but it's not for us, it's for the future. We're not going to fix this in our lifetime, so why should we just quit? There's no way I'm finishing this.
Do the best you can in the minute you have left.
Okay, so moving on to the second secondary claim is he said that there is a failure to reach global accord on limiting the cause of rising CO2 levels. He said that not all of the nations are meeting their CO2. They're failed to reduce their GHG emissions. My reasoning challenge is that not all the nations actually need to meet this. There is a program through the Kyoto Protocol called the International Emissions Trading. This allows for for nations that couldn't reach their reduction limit level to trade with other companies that were able to and in excess. So if they couldn't meet it, they just trade their emissions to the other company and it balances out. Also, I'd like to say that there's also no evidence stating that the developed countries think it is useless to not include all developed countries, which is something that he said. And moving on to the third secondary claim, he said that it is difficult to react to the consequences of the effects of increased greenhouse gases. There's actually no evidence stating that it was difficult to react to anything, and that's pretty much a value-based claim. I would just like to add one of the largest causes of the ice caps melting, which is one of the examples of the negative climate effects, was one of the ozone hole that contributes to the ice caps melting. That is actually healing itself. The hole was caused by CFCs, which were outlawed by the Montreal Protocol in 1987, according to Washington Post. Also, according to one of the scientists quoted on the Washington Post that I forgot to write down, the hole should heal itself by 2050, meaning that any of the ice cap melting causes the ozone hole, that should be completely, that cause is going to be wiped out by 2050. And the reason the hole is closing, according to Paul Newman, who is on the UN Environmental Board, he said that let me just read it. The levels of carbon dioxide and other gases help cool the upper stratosphere, which increases the amount of ozone, which means that it heals the hole. So, in conclusion, it is not too late to change the effects of global climate change. There are ways to reverse it, or there are ways to make it worse, however you're going to take the argument.
Thank you. Samuel Cruz Prado.